The Cult in the Shadows. James Tynan was no stranger to the darker corners of the internet. As an investigative journalist, he had explored forums, hidden marketplaces, and obscure chat rooms in pursuit of stories that others would never dare to uncover. But nothing could have prepared him for The Sanctuary. Late one night, after hours of chasing leads on a cybercrime story, James stumbled upon a link buried deep within an encrypted message. Intrigued, he followed it, finding himself in a forum unlike any he had ever seen. The Sanctuary appeared to be a place for sharing esoteric knowledge and discussing ancient rituals. Its members were anonymous, their posts filled with cryptic symbols and archaic languages. James's curiosity was piqued. He began spending more time on the forum, trying to decipher the posts and understand the community's true purpose. The deeper he delved, the more he realized that the Sanctuary was more than just a gathering of occult enthusiasts. It was a cult, a dangerous one. Members spoke in hushed tones about the offering, a ritual that required a human sacrifice. James found references to a dark entity they worshipped, one that promised power and immortality in exchange for blood. He was horrified but couldn't tear himself away. He knew he had to expose them. As James gathered information, he started receiving cryptic messages. At first, they were simple warnings, "Stop digging," but soon they became more threatening. "We see you, James." His heart raced as he realized the cult knew who he was. He tried to cover his tracks, but it was too late. They were watching him. One night, a package arrived at his doorstep. Inside was a black envelope containing a single, blood-red feather and a note. "You are marked." Panic set in. James contacted his editor, friends, and even the police, but no one took his claims seriously. Desperate, he decided to take a bold risk. He hacked into the Sanctuary's network, hoping to find definitive proof of their activities. What he found was more terrifying than he could have imagined. The cult was planning a major ritual, and they intended to livestream it on the dark web. Worse, he discovered that the sacrifice for this ritual was him. James's heart pounded as he realized he had become their target. James fled his apartment, seeking refuge with his friend, Lisa, who was the only person who believed him. Together, they devised a plan to expose the cult. James would hack into the livestream and broadcast it to the public, revealing the cult's horrifying practices to the world. On the night of the ritual, James and Lisa set up their equipment. As the cult began their ceremony, James managed to intercept the stream and broadcast it on multiple platforms. The world watched in shock as hooded figures chanted around a bound and gagged man, James. As the ritual reached its peak, a dark presence filled the room. The hooded leader raised a dagger, chanting in a language that sent chills down James's spine. Suddenly, the air shimmered, and a shadowy figure emerged. The entity they worshipped had manifested. The viewers watched in horror as the entity's eyes locked onto the camera. The hooded figures turned towards the screen, their faces hidden but their malevolent intent clear. James struggled to keep the stream going, but the cult was already moving towards him. Just as the entity's tendrils reached for him, the screen went dark. The last thing the world saw was James being dragged away, his screams echoing through the void. The live stream caused an uproar. Authorities launched investigations, but the Sanctuary had vanished, leaving no trace behind. Friends and family of James were questioned, but none knew of his whereabouts. Lisa, devastated and paranoid, retreated from public life. She couldn't shake the feeling that the cult was still watching, waiting for their next move. And she was right. The cult was everywhere, hidden in plain sight. They continued their dark rituals, ever watchful for those who dared to uncover their secrets. And somewhere, in the shadows, they waited for their next offering. The Whispering Forest. Jake Lawson was your typical teenager, tech-savvy and always on the hunt for the next big thrill. He spent most of his free time exploring the internet, diving into forums, and tinkering with software. One night, as he navigated the murky waters of the dark web, he stumbled upon a hidden forum. Among the various threads, one in particular caught his eye. The Whispering Forest, a game like no other. The post was enticing. It described an old, obscure game that promised an immersive experience, allowing players to communicate with spirits from another dimension. Skeptical but intrigued, Jake clicked the link. The download was quick, and soon the icon for the Whispering Forest appeared on his desktop. Its eerie design both intriguing and foreboding. Jake double-clicked the icon, and the screen flickered before plunging into darkness. A haunting melody played as the title screen emerged, adorned with twisted trees and ghostly figures. He clicked Start, and the game began. The premise was simple: explore a haunted forest and solve puzzles to uncover the stories of restless spirits. The graphics were surprisingly detailed for an old game, the forest rendered with dark, shadowy depth. As Jake navigated his character through the dense woods, he felt a chill run down his spine, the game's atmosphere seeping into his reality. Hours flew by as Jake delved deeper into the game. He encountered various spirits, each with their own tragic backstory. The puzzles were challenging but rewarding, revealing more about the haunted forest and its spectral inhabitants. But then, strange things started happening. First, it was just whispers, faint and barely audible. They echoed through his headphones, growing louder and more distinct with each passing hour. He chalked it up to the game's immersive design, but then he began hearing the whispers even when the game was off. They followed him around the house, an ever-present murmur that set his nerves on edge. Next came the shadows, flickering at the edge of his vision. They darted and danced in the periphery, vanishing when he turned to look. Cold spots appeared in his room, patches of freezing air that chilled him to the bone. The game was bleeding into his reality, and he could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. Determined to uncover the truth, Jake pressed on. The spirits in the game began to communicate with him directly, their messages more desperate and coherent. They claimed to be trapped souls, bound to the forest by a malevolent force. They pleaded for his help, urging him to complete the game and free them from their torment. One spirit, a young girl named Eliza, became his guide. Her story was heartbreaking, a life cut short by tragedy, her soul bound to the forest in an eternal cycle of suffering. She revealed that the game's final level involved performing a ritual in the real world to break the curse and release the spirits. Desperation drove Jake to comply. The hauntings had intensified, the whispers now a constant chorus, the shadows closing in, and the cold spots more frequent. He needed to end this to find peace again. Eliza provided him with a list of items required for the ritual: candles, a mirror, salt, and an old key that had mysteriously appeared on his desk one morning. Jake gathered everything and prepared for the ritual, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The instructions were clear: draw a circle of salt, place the candles at the cardinal points, and use the mirror to channel the spirits. As he lit the candles and positioned the mirror, the room grew colder, the shadows thicker, the whispers louder. The ritual began smoothly. Jake chanted the incantation provided by Eliza, the words foreign and harsh on his tongue. The air around him crackled with energy, the shadows coalescing into darker, more defined shapes. He could feel the presence of the spirits, their anguish and hope palpable. As he finished the incantation, a blinding light erupted from the mirror. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the light faded, and Jake realized with dawning horror what he had done. The spirits were free, but they were not the benign souls he had envisioned. They were malevolent entities, twisted by years of torment and rage. The room exploded into chaos. The shadows solidified into grotesque forms, their eyes glowing with malevolence. They lunged at Jake, their whispers now a cacophony of screams. He tried to flee, but the spirits were relentless, their fury unleashed upon him. They tore at his flesh, their spectral hands freezing and burning at the same time. In his final moments, Jake's mind raced. He had been tricked, manipulated into opening a portal for these malevolent entities. Eliza's sorrowful face flashed before him, her once pleading eyes now cold and unforgiving. He had been a pawn in their escape, a means to an end. As the spirits overwhelmed him, Jake's last thought was one of bitter regret. The game had promised an immersive experience, and it had delivered beyond his worst nightmares. The Whispering Forest was no mere game. It was a gateway to hell, and he had unwittingly opened it. The screen of his computer flickered one last time before going dark, the icon of the Whispering Forest disappearing from his desktop as if it had never existed. The whispers ceased, the shadows dissipated, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Outside, the night was still, the world unaware of the horror that had just unfolded within the walls of Jake's home. The Abyss. One late night, Alex Parker stumbled upon an encrypted link on a hidden forum. It was simply titled The Abyss. Intrigued by its anonymity and the air of mystery surrounding it, Alex decided to explore further. The link led to a dark web chat room, rumored to be a meeting place for those with the darkest of fantasies and experiences. Under the alias Seeker, Alex entered the chat room. The initial conversations were mundane, filled with anonymous users discussing hacking techniques and illegal trades. But as Seeker delved deeper, the true nature of the Abyss began to reveal itself. The chat room was a cesspool of human depravity. Users with handles like Butcher, Lunatic, and Ripper shared their darkest fantasies, boasting about their real-life crimes with a sense of twisted pride. They detailed their heinous acts, from gruesome murders to intricate torture techniques, reveling in the horror they inflicted. Seeker was initially repulsed but couldn't look away. The anonymity of the dark web provided a shield, allowing Alex to explore the depths of human darkness without fear of exposure. The other members seemed to sense Seeker's curiosity and began to draw them in, sharing more graphic stories and inviting them to join private chats. As days turned into weeks, Seeker became a regular in the Abyss. The chat room's members welcomed them into their fold, sharing tips on avoiding capture and exchanging detailed plans for future atrocities. The sense of twisted camaraderie was intoxicating, and Seeker found themselves drawn deeper into the group's macabre world. One night, during a particularly gruesome discussion, Seeker stumbled upon something that made their blood run cold. The members were planning a grand meeting, a real-world gathering where they would carry out a mass murder spree. The details were chillingly precise, outlining locations, weapons, and victims. It was no longer a place for sharing fantasies. It was a breeding ground for real-life horror. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Seeker decided it was time to back out. But the chat room's atmosphere had changed. The members, sensing Seeker's hesitation, began to turn on them. Cryptic messages appeared. "We know who you are, Seeker," and "There's no leaving the Abyss." Panic set in as Alex realized their true identity had been discovered. Desperate, they tried to erase all traces of their involvement, but it was too late. The psychopaths of the Abyss were on the hunt, and Seeker was their next target. Seeker's paranoia reached a fever pitch as strange things began happening. They received anonymous threats, their home was broken into, and they felt the constant presence of unseen eyes. The The psychopaths were closing in, and Alex knew they had to act fast. Using the knowledge gained from the chat room, Seeker devised a plan. They would attend the planned meeting but use the psychopaths' own tactics against them. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only way to survive. The meeting site was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with tension as Seeker approached, their heart pounding in their chest. Inside, the psychopaths were preparing for their gruesome event, unaware that their prey had become the predator. Seeker moved silently through the shadows, using the layout of the warehouse to their advantage. They had learned the members' identities and weaknesses from the chat room and were ready to exploit them. The first to fall was Butcher, a hulking figure who took pleasure in brute strength. Seeker lured him into a trap, using a makeshift weapon to incapacitate him. Next was Lunatic, whose erratic behavior made him unpredictable but ultimately vulnerable. One by one, Seeker took them down, their fear fueling their determination. The final confrontation was with Ripper, the mastermind behind the mass murder plan. He was cunning and ruthless, but Seeker had one advantage: the element of surprise. In a harrowing struggle, Seeker managed to turn the tables, using Ripper's own knife against him. As dawn broke, Seeker emerged from the warehouse, bloodied but alive. The psychopaths of the Abyss were no more, their twisted meeting ending in chaos and bloodshed. Alex had survived, but the experience had left an indelible mark. The Abyss was shut down, its dark secrets buried in the ruins of the warehouse. But Alex knew that the shadows of the dark web still lurked, waiting for the next curious soul to stumble upon them. They had escaped with their life, but the haunting memories of the Abyss would stay with them forever. In the end, Alex learned a harsh lesson about the depths of human depravity and the dangers of anonymity. The Abyss had promised a glimpse into the darkest corners of the human psyche, and it had delivered, leaving a trail of horror in its wake.